So I'm going to share a bit about the work that the Kofi Annan Foundation has done under the Extremely Together initiative that we implemented during a pretty difficult time because we launched the project in February 2020, a couple of weeks before the world went into lockdown. And it included also some of the longest school closures in the world, both in the Philippines and Bangladesh. We faced some natural disasters and security challenges in the countries where we worked, to name a few. But I think these challenges, as a lesson, also clearly demonstrated the leadership and agency of young people to work in their communities and their capacity to continuously innovate and adapt to emerging challenges and respond to them quite creatively. So I will start by just giving a brief introduction about our youth-led initiative, Extremely Together, and how we have gotten here. So, as mentioned, the Extremely Together is a global youth initiative of the Kofi Annan Foundation, and it was founded under the leadership of former UN Secretary General and our late founder, Mr. Kofi Annan, in 2016. And it started as a network of 10 young leaders across the world, from Asia to Africa. We have leaders in the Middle East and Europe who all address preventing violent extremism through different approaches. So integrating peace education, interfaith harmony, strategic communications, digital campaigning, technology, and so on. And based on their areas of expertise, our ET young leaders created a toolkit by young people to young people on how to prevent violent extremism. So it was a global resource that was translated into different languages. And this peer-to-peer approach to preventing violent extremism was then expanded to being more locally rooted, to be able to address the context-specific and complex needs of the communities that are affected by violent extremism. So we tested an approach in East Africa, in Somalia and Uganda. We created a model of establishing youth communities that we call as ET chapters. And then for the past 2 years, until last year, we worked in South and Southeast Asia in urban areas of Pakistan, the Philippines, and Bangladesh, particularly following the increasing recruitment of middle-class educated young people to violent extremist groups in key urban areas. And this project, Leading the Way to Peace, Youth Together for Social Cohesion, was supported by the EU. Our aim was to train and inspire youth across cities to take concrete action to preventing violent extremism, and then more broadly, regionally, to bring young leaders, civil society organizations, and regional experts together for sharing and learning. And it was quite a significant component, the sharing and learning part throughout the project, and it culminated to some key events towards the end of the project. So the project was implemented together with local youth organizations, including also GSURF, together with their local partner in Bangladesh. And we managed to train over 2,100 young people and supported the implementation of over 40 youth-led projects and campaigns in over 10 cities. And these projects were completely youth-led, designed by them and implemented by them. And as I mentioned, the learning and sharing component, we came together with 30 youth-led and youth-serving organizations and 60 young people and regional actors to draw on these experiences and consolidating inspiring practices to understand also a bit better what works and what remains a challenge when we are engaging young people for PVE and then more widely also for peace building. So hopefully this is the interesting part that comes now. So the findings that we consolidated, we created a guide that is called Building Peace Together. And I make a small pause here. There will be a QR code at the end of the presentation. So you can digitally access the full guide, but there's also an executive summary that we created specifically with key policy and programmatic recommendations to complement those that I will share during this presentation. You can find more in the publication. So all the resources are available at the Kofi Annan Foundation webpage under Extremely Together. So from this guide and our experience, I would just like to highlight a couple of points on what worked and what created a positive impact. And these findings were basically co-created with young people and the partners that we worked with. So it was based on several workshops and understanding the key thematics in terms of what worked, what didn't. So first of all, I would like to highlight what became quite evident during this project and when we were facilitating peer learning, is that among dozens and other local, regional youth and PV actors, there's a huge need for safe spaces, sharing and support networks at diverse levels, so vary from the local also to cross-regional. So these connections that the young people are able to create, whether it is with their peers in the same community or in their school, or with other young people in another continent, they support bonding, trust building, and friendships, and also foster their sense of belonging to something bigger that goes way beyond their immediate communities and gives them meaning and gives them purpose. These youth networks also provide a sounding boards for their ideas, so it provokes innovation, it provokes new perspectives, and at best can help refine strategies and approaches to youth engagement and peer action that they can implement then to prevent violent extremism, foster social cohesion in their own communities. So they get a constant feedback loop, and that was maintained through different WhatsApp groups, through different events, and then independently they went and created these more direct relationships with their peers. A second point is about mobilizing and engaging young people in preventing violent extremism. So throughout the diverse activities that we implemented, our local partners strive to make PV attractive to the urban youth. So we carried out youth-led research to identify key challenges, entry points, how to involve young people, and then tailor capacity building programs to be responsive to the local youth populations, and especially targeting and focusing on marginalized groups, so across religious, ethnic, gender, socioeconomic backgrounds. And importantly, this also helped understanding how the concept and term of PVE is understood by the youth and in their communities. It's something that was mentioned earlier during this conference as well. So understanding the terminology and how it's used locally was very important. And based on this, across the 3 countries we worked in, our youth partners gave the young people a how-to through implementing training programs, which were practical workshops, and then the liberty to design and pitch their own projects to build social cohesion in their communities, which were supported by us or by the funds that we had to give them small grants and awards. So we ran different grants competitions and gamified a bit the process for them having this kind of support of implementing projects in their communities. So we showed basically that PVE can be relatable and fun, for example, through recreational activities, so involving sports, theater, arts, culture. And a topic such as PV that might be sounding a bit technical or in some contexts it's too sensitive to suddenly can become more approachable. And not only for the youth, but also to their communities. So we provided neutral platforms for them to come together, and then as part of that to also discuss some of the challenges that they face. And for this, we went beyond working with the usual suspects and collaborated with community and social media influencers, journalists, artists, athletes, and other role models who can trigger young people's interest and motivate them to participate in the activities. So for example, in Pakistan, we had a first female cyclist who conquered one of very high mountains, and she was very admired by the youth community in Pakistan, and she organized one of the activities together with the youth, and it was a huge success, covered even in the national media. And this leads to the third point. So after the how-to becomes the why-to. So when we motivate young people to join the network, the next step is to keep them motivated to stay engaged in the action. Because, of course, when it comes to preventing violent extremism or building peace, it takes a lot of time. So it's not one-off type of activity. We need to foster a network or a community that keeps young people active and dedicated to the cause. So the particular challenge with young people particularly is that they juggle many responsibilities, school, employment, family, food. And a crucial point here is to ensure that their safety and their financial and mental well-being, which altogether constitute a broader concept of offering them incentives, is covered. So we encourage them to participate, but also we are able to alleviate some of the challenges and difficulties they might be facing simultaneously. So whether financial or non-financial, we are supporting and catering the specific needs and conditions of the participating youth. So we give opportunities to participate in decision-making of the network, for example, having access to mentorship, that was mentioned, internships, practical resources, certificates, that was mentioned earlier. It's a really important thing. Increased visibility, so for example, participating, having speaking opportunities, providing them safe spaces and accompaniment. So just being there and knowing that they have a network to resort to is important. So this leads me to the recommendations. So how can we continue supporting youth engagement in preventing violent extremism? There are key recommendations, way more recommendations in the executive summary, but I will briefly mention a few of them. So based on our experience as part of this project and more widely under Extremely Together, PV efforts are often limited to targeting low-income and rural youth. And we suggest that programming should comprehensively also involve urban, educated, middle-class youth. And in the 3 countries where we worked, we found urban youth are increasingly targeted by violent extremist recruitment, especially online. And this was very significant in Bangladesh particularly. However, young people in general remain largely excluded from PVE, despite being key in exerting influence on their peers. And also they have a significant reach online and offline among their peers. So this peer influence, as was mentioned also earlier today, is very effective when it comes to joining VE groups. But I think what we could do is to use this knowledge and use it to drive peer influence of involving young people into positive action. And as more and more young people are concentrating in cities and young people are representing all the time a bigger portion of population, not only in Asia but also in Africa, urban youth should be included in defining what peace building and PV efforts should look like. And we should also support them in that process. And then one important point that I think is applicable beyond youth programming, but I still want to highlight the significance, particularly in this context, that we strengthen the flexibility and long-term support by donors and partners when it comes to programming and initiatives that are aiming to prevent violent extremism. First of all, because changing behaviors and attitudes takes time. Also, young people are often surrounded by traditional and very hierarchical contexts, so they are faced with diverse social pressures and resistance for doing something different. And again, that also takes time to break those barriers. And we also need to make sure that they are accompanied and the support structures are available within their countries and communities to encourage their agency and legitimacy, and also to protect their work in a space where the civil society space particularly is shrinking activists and PV advocates all the time. And finally, as we move forward, we need to continue striving for a comprehensive PVE approach that includes understanding and acting on the interconnected and compound challenges. So we noted very particularly, and as I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, we faced natural disasters, we faced significant security threats, and these are some of the aspects that if we do not consider disinformation or more widely online media and the impact on young people and the recruitment on violent extremism, or environmental shocks and climate vulnerability, or mental health, especially following COVID-19, the programming will lack impact. And this is just a snapshot of what we learned, and more widely on this topic that is quite multi-layered, because one aspect is supporting youth organizations, and of course then there are young people that are reached by those youth organizations. So there are many lessons to be learned, and I think we are in the beginning of that journey, and we are excited to learn more about it. But I just would like to use my final remarks to thank Hedayah for including this topic on the agenda, because it's often sidelined and treated in silos. And be it PVE or peace and security more widely, this is not a youth issue, so we should treat it in forums where we are discussing also topics that are related and relevant to the topics, not only among young people, but also more widely among practitioners and researchers and donors and policymakers. So it's our mutual benefit, it's our mutual responsibility, and I think it was mentioned in the context of gender, but I would like to highlight that this is something that happens a lot in the youth space as well, so it's great to have this panel, and I thank for that.